It's a real delight to have back with us Charles Ridley, who was last here a couple of months ago talking about dynamic stillness, which was a really wonderful podcast. If you want to have a look at that, please do. And today we're going to be talking about the neutral, which is a very interesting subject. Those of you who don't know Charles, he's very well known in the biodynamic craniosacral world. He's written a couple of books, one called Stillness, which was published in 2006, and also one called Stillness Touch, which I've got, which is really, really wonderful. And so Charles is talking to us today from his home in Mexico. So, Charles, I've just discovered from your website this download of this sheet, which I think we're going to let people have copies of around the neutral. Is that right? Can we do the link to that? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
Alrighty. So in preparation for this, I was doing a little bit of research, my own research on this, and it's quite confusing when you look at how different teachers use the word neutral, isn't it?
Yes.
I was looking at, the way that Franklin describes it in his books and the way that James Jealous talks about it and Roland Becker talks about it and, and Sutherland infers it. So maybe
Yeah.
let's start somewhere in terms of do you want to have a go at defining what the neutral is? Well, first of all, I mean, Franklin talks about it from the point of view of practitioner neutral as well. And then the others tend to talk about it more from the point of the client's neutral, right?
Right.
I don't know. Do you want to focus on the client neutral? Do you want to put it in some context for us, Charles?
Yeah. To me, if we put all these definitions together, the neutral is really a state of consciousness in which the attention is free. It's not fixed on a motion. It's not fixed on an agenda. It's not fixed on being a practitioner. It's not fixed on treating symptom relief, but it's a point of freedom. And there's a felt sense when we are in neutral. And the first thing we will notice is that our body starts to feel less gravity laden. It becomes more lighter. And then the second, which is really the osteopathic biodynamic sensation of the neutral, is the felt sense of the tissues that are before neutral separate, anatomy and tendons and ligaments and muscles and bones. That shifts and the whole body becomes one fluid unit. And it's free flowing. And there's not a particular place that you can locate that sticks out unless it's inertial, of course.
Yeah.
Because you can't see health.
No.
You can't find, I mean, somebody says to find health. Well, good luck.
Well, you can kind of sense it though, can't you?
Yeah, go ahead.
Right. And I suppose one of the things that Jealous talks a lot about is the neutral as being a place of like dynamic stillness as well, which you can feel, which you can sense, obviously.
See, now that's a deep, deep, deep neutral. There are stages of neutral. Neutral continues to deepen, in my opinion and in my experience, forever.
Right.
I mean, it just doesn't end because we're talking about consciousness, aren't we?
Yes.
We're talking about a consciousness that's freed from the conditioning of our lives, of our practitioner trainings and everything.
Yes.
And of course it evolves, doesn't it?
Yes.
But neutral is just a doorway. It's a name for the doorway to accessing consciousness.
Yes.
And consciousness has two aspects, right? We have an aspect that we call potency, which is stillness, unmanifest. And then we have the breaths, which is expression. of the potency. The potency starts to manifest, and in 9 months after conception, it turns into a human body, right? So
Yeah.
neutral's a doorway to that whole mystery.
Yeah.
And dynamic stillness might be called capital T, capital H, capital E neutral, the neutral.
The neutral. Right.
And if you're really in dynamic stillness and you've let it taken you, let it have you, and you kind of are not separate from dynamic stillness, then you are the neutral.
Yes.
You are being neutral. You're not John in neutral. You're neutral, and I can call you John if I want to.
Yes.
Or not, right? So then, does it matter what we do from that place on some level or not another, from that place of neutral to dynamic stillness? You answer that. What do you think?
No, absolutely not. I mean, is the kind of place that I like to work from and I gravitate to for sure. And then whatever happens. I mean, well, I've when I was just reading briefly about different people's approaches to it, I was really intrigued actually by, and I have some of the old Jim Jellis's CDs. I don't know if you've seen like some of his talks and things like this.
Yeah.
And he's some of the excerpts from that when he's talking about like different kind of approaches to this, and he describes the more difficult one, the more advanced one, as starting from a place of dynamic stillness. And then, but before that, if you can't do that, he talks about other things that you can do, like, encouraging an EV4. He talks about working with lateral fluctuations. And I know that Sutherland used to talk about that as well. So like kind of artificially encouraging lateral fluctuations, all this kind of stuff, which actually is not the way I work and is not something that's at all, or I don't think I'd want to work like that, but also it's not, it's sort of outside of my scope of practice, I could say, really. So
I agree 100%. And I think the context is important why Jellis does that. He's doing this, at least at first, before he went to Europe, with fully licensed medical practitioners. Osteopaths in America are medical doctors, basically.
Yeah.
They learn drugs, they learn surgery, they learn everything.
Yeah.
Deliver babies, they sign death certificates, birth certificates, they do liver transplants. And those folks need a lot of help.
Yeah.
Sorry to say, to find neutral.
Right.
And so he sets up here's where we want to go, but let's be real, we're not going to go there right now. Let's go backwards. And so he works with diagnostic processes, which is confounding because he doesn't use that in the biodynamic work itself, but he uses that to train the physicians out of being a physician. So he kind of starts from where with the material he's got, which are licensed medical physicians, osteopaths. And then he says, well, what are we going to do? I mean, listen to this, it's a 9-year program.
Wow.
The biodynamic program that Jim Jellis developed is 9 years long.
Wow. Wow.
That's how long it takes an osteopath to learn how to do be still and know I am. Sorry. I mean, it's true. I mean, he wouldn't do it if it wasn't necessary.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I get you.
And he ends up where we are in our, like you say, I wouldn't want to do that. I wouldn't either, because it's really messing with the system like an experiment. But they're doing it with each other, so it's okay.
You said what? Sorry, what did you say?
They're doing it with each other in the room, so it's okay.
Right. So, students, right.
Hopefully they're not doing that on patients.
Right. Yes.
So it's very confounding because, I've said in stillness a long time ago that Jim Jellis teaches some efferent practices. And I got a letter from a man from the Netherlands who said, oh, Charles, that's totally not correct. I took all 9 years. And not once did he say to do anything as a practitioner, not to feel with the hands, he says it's all about being in neutral and letting the breath of life be in charge of the entire session. He says from the get-go to the end. I went, well, thank you for that. because that's not evident in his writings or his CDs.
No, that's true.
Yeah, see?
No.
So
what you're talking about, Charles, really is to distinguish here. Are you talking about practitioner neutral? You're talking about client neutral, or you're talking about a combination of the two? What do you?
yeah. Mainly, I think where the buck begins, the buck stops where the buck begins, where the neutral begins, is right here inside me.
Yeah.
In other words, if I am not gonna be able to find my own innerness that leads me to the place inside me that is fundamentally already neutral.
Yeah.
Which if we want to get fancy, we could say it's our midline, couldn't we?
Sure. And more than that, right? Yeah.
The midline, the column of stillness, however big that is, we don't necessarily think of this little thin line from the crown to the perineum.
Yeah.
The midline can be infinite, can't it?
Absolutely.
When you get into the midline space, it can expand to infinity, which here we are. We're in dynamic stillness now. See, right? Yeah. So so that's our work.
Mm-hmm.
And Duval was a protege of Becker. And he said the primary work of the practitioner is to work on themselves, the spiritual development of themselves. That's our fundamental work in biodynamics when we're working with patients.
Yeah.
I happen to agree, and I think you would too.
Yeah, I would. I mean, what intrigues me, and actually I came across this today with a client as well, is how important it is to be, as a practitioner, to be aware of that. Because there's also something, I've done years of meditation practice, and there's something that perhaps one takes for granted as a practitioner, that one is coming from a place of stillness more than I realize sometimes. And somehow that gets transmitted, or people feel that field and they go with it. And so I suppose I'm saying that because very commonly, and this happened today, where I might not necessarily be feeling quite so still in myself, but I kind of know it's there. But there's something in the field that picks up on that, and the client goes into that. So I'm just wondering, how important is it? Because we can beat ourselves up, can't we, as practitioners? Right. Oh, I should be feeling this. I should be more still and all this kind of stuff. But it was interesting today that I got some feedback from a client, and this has happened a couple of times, where they, in fact, actually was just after they left the room and they got in their car, and then what they described as this blanket of deep stillness, the kind of stillness that you would describe as well, you call it dynamic stillness. We would call it dynamic stillness. And that happened after the session. That was interesting.
Yes. We never know, do we? We never.
No, we don't.
That's the thing. See, I've given up trying to know anything about what's going on, because it's always a little bit not it.
Right.
So I let the people tell me what happened, and then I correlate it with what I was experiencing. Yeah. And then I can that's how I learn. That's how I gain experience and become more able to be neutral. And back to that important point of that, sometimes I don't feel neutral. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I might be stressed. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I might be whacked out, whatever it is. That doesn't mean I can't access the midline of stillness inside of me, and that still does the work.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't have to show up perfect, that day at the table with that person. I just need to show up in myself, in the midline, and I'll be able to access that, which is always neutral.
Yes. So and it can also work the other way sometimes, can't it? Because sometimes you feel, my God, that was an amazing session. I felt, oh God, it went so deep, and and the person then which is really frustrating.
That's why I gave up. That's why I gave up knowing, because I might think it was a great session, and they go, was that it? And then on the other hand, I go, man, that was going to be a terrible session for that person. And then they tell me what that person told you about it in the car. You see, it's a mystery.
Yeah.
And I just want to leave it that way. It's kind of behind the curtain, isn't it? You know,
Yeah.
what's really going on. And I've learned over the years just to not open the curtain
Sure.
and to be patient enough to just let whatever needs to be revealed to me to be revealed. And what doesn't get revealed is okay. I'm okay
Yeah.
with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful.
Yeah.
So I mentioned at the beginning, Charles, this chart,
Yeah.
and I had a very brief look at it. I'm sorry I didn't see it beforehand, but and we can let people have a link to that. I mean, I could even screen share it now if you'd like.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we could, because it's not something that's familiar to me, and maybe you could
Mhm.
just talk a bit about it. Would that be
Yeah.
all right?
Absolutely.
So you've got it on your machine, and we could get it up that way. But I'll
Mhm.
um so let's see. I think
I'm not technical enough to put it on. I don't know how to do that.
no, that's fine. Well, it's fine. We'll do it. Let's see. Okay. How's that? You see that
Got
now?
it?
Is
Yeah.
that the one? Yeah.
Let me see. Oh, yeah. That's
Yeah.
right on the screen. You did that. That's great. Okay. Holy
So, yeah,
cow.
so do you want to, because this is new to me, so do you want to talk through it?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about this because this is a Buddhist principle. And on the left side, well, the left side of the screen, anyhow, they're the fears, and then the other side are the desires, right? And you know the story about the Buddha is he was Siddhartha. He was this rich person who left the kingdom and he went out into the world and he felt untold suffering and he couldn't take it and he sort of sat by this tree and he had Mara, the demon of fear and desire, was taunting him. On one side, it was all these horrific, scary demons, and on the other side are these beautiful dakinis, desire. And he was being torn back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And finally, he made this commitment that he wasn't going to move. He was to stay between those two, neutral. Boom, the Buddha was born. So that's the premise of this chart. Is
Okay,
the
so this midline here, this line.
exactly, and you see the CDs, the superpowers, the transpersonal powers that you have. Oneness in the seventh chakra, the sixth chakra is insight, the fifth chakra is truth, the fourth chakra is love, the third chakra is power. I can't see the after two, but the sex and money. There we go. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so what if we were to look at that chart and each of the levels, we're going to find that some of these things are obvious. Oh, yeah, well, I'm not afraid of touching somebody, or I am afraid of touching somebody, or that's number two. Number five, oh, I'm afraid that I'm going to be unmaxed as a fraud. Number fifth chakra, our fear of separation and abandonment. Number four, fear of being insufficient, not good enough, not enough power, not enough ability. So those are easy for practitioners. But if we go over to the longings, in other words, those are easy to navigate.
Right.
The fear side is pretty simple. But the desire side, going up, let's just go to the bottom. Desire for change, this is relative to, by the way, this chart is developed relative to a practitioner and a patient.
Right.
Because it was made for caregivers. And so this is the dynamics that we experience. So longing to embody the spirit, longing for safety or protection, desire for security. That's the number one. Number two, longing for regenerative energy during the session, longing for physical expression, connection with my recipient, desire for physical touch, desire for sexual contact. Number three, longing to be a healer, desire to control the client's process, desire for the client's respect. Number 4, right? I mean, you think about all these things that can go on that pull us up, and these are not neutral, see? Every one of these things on this chart are out of neutral. And so the only way to be in neutral is to not desire to be cherished, not long for spiritual connection, not be compassionate. And a better way to say it is to not let those draw us out of the center.
Right.
It's not that we won't have those things. Do they drive us?
Yeah.
And so the question for myself is, am I letting the longing to be a conduit for spiritual truth draw me out of my center? Am I letting my desire to speak and act with integrity draw me out of my center? And on it goes. And so this is a beautiful self-inquiry process, which each individual of these, for our own selves as practitioners, do we long for union? Do we long for transcendence? Well, if we do, there's an agenda, isn't it?
Well,
and
that's
neutral.
but because who is this referring to? Is this referring to the practitioner here, longing for union, or because I suppose one of the things that can happen during a session, I quite often feel this is like one is almost like going on a journey together into dynamic stillness.
Absolutely.
You could say that was a longing for a union, I suppose. I mean, it's a very beautiful thing. It's a very intimate thing, isn't it?
Exactly.
There is a desire for that to happen, say, within a session, and it doesn't always happen. Sometimes it does, right? So would you say that draws you away from the...
If I let that motivate me, you see, it's not that I don't have any of these things. I have probably all of these on both sides, somewhere in myself. Yeah. Are they driving me to act during the session based on those longings or based on those fears? See, that's the question.
Right.
And neutral is not being moved by either one, not being driven. In other words, the bus of Charles in neutral is driven by the potency and the expression of the potency. If I'm totally neutral. Not neutral is I'm longing for union, or I want them to think I'm a great practitioner, or I want them to have a fluid tide experience, or on and on it goes. And that moves me. In other words, how I work on the person is colored by my desire or my fear.
Right.
And that's big, because I'll tell you, medical approaches are frankly based on fear, and spiritual practices are a lot of times based on desire. Desire for the bliss, desire for the connection, desire for the union, desire for the enlightenment, desire to become more of this or more of that, more enlightened, and on it goes. And the important thing about the neutral to me is that we, the practitioner, we're the ones that have the room that the people are coming into. Our responsibility is to the neutral.
Right.
How deep they go into the neutral is on some level not my business. Right? That's the business between them and their own potency. But we set up the stage by having our meditative practice, our daily meditative practice. And then for me, I don't know about what you do, John, but for me, I do a little mini practice for 2 minutes or so, 3 minutes before I start touching. Yeah, right. I tell them we do the whole thing in the beginning, and then I tell them I'm gonna do some preparation the first time. After the first time, you don't have to do that. And then I do my little inner meditation. Until there's till whatever it is, whatever the depth of neutral comes that day with that person, that hour. And then I know it's time to touch. From that sort of tap on the shoulder, that buoyancy or the fluidity or the depth or the black or the infinite, whatever it may be. And then I go about my business. Hopefully always guided by that inner, the innerness, not my mind, not my fears, not my desires, but the innerness, the inner qualities that come up from the neutral inside me.
Can you, Charles, can you describe that little practice? I know it's very individual. Can you describe that little practice that you do?
Yeah, it's the word I get it. By the way, this isn't teachable. It's only gettable.
Yeah.
But I call it tonal match, meaning that inside me, when I'm in neutral, there are qualities occurring inside my inner body space. Because my work with neutral has to do with an orienting inside myself.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not orienting outward. I'm not looking for tides out there. I'm not looking for dynamic stillness out there. I'm totally oriented in here.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever comes up, whether it's a tidal thing, which doesn't happen anymore, but if what could be, I guess, or if it's a dynamic stillness, or if it's a pure breath experience, that sets me up for an atmosphere inside myself as a practitioner. There's an inner atmosphere. You could almost call it weather. You know, the weather's cloudy, it's clear, it's sunny, it's warm. But the qualities that are occurring inside me during neutral are what moves my hands. Non-verbal, non-mental, non-based on training. It's almost instinctual.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like the movement that comes out of the stillness moves my hands to a certain place.
Mm-hmm.
And I might not even know why my hands are going there. Most of the time I don't, until that magic time after the session's over and we have a little chat. And they tell me, oh, when you were on this place, this happened. And it was so wonderful because blah, 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 right? You know, the whole,
Yeah.
what I call the magic of this, the miracle of this. You go to yourself, well, I didn't know why I was doing that, but look at what they told me. And so this tonal match thing is a language without words that we learn inside ourselves by trial and error until
Yeah.
we get more and more refined and available to being moved by something that's not me and not my conditioning, my longings and my desires, my fears and my longings. So it's a big work, actually, when you think about how to operate out of true neutral.
Mm. So I suppose then that and I agree with you completely. So it's lovely to hear you speak about this, but so I suppose then it feels to me that it's not so important to cognitively be aware of when you are working with a pattern or whatever it is that oh, this is happening in their left shoulder. I need to go to their left shoulder and it's down at their right hip, or all that kind of stuff that we can get very absorbed in and very, I over the last few years been developing some work using this sort of like remotely with people, which I find very interesting. And the way I work is like, I don't say I'd switch my mind off, but it's very much coming through my hands and I don't know why.
Beautiful.
I don't know why. So,
Beautiful.
and very similar with this, that in a way, yeah, I'm just wondering, maybe we could talk a little bit about this, about the cognitive element and how important that is or not.
Yeah.
Because people can get very fixated on that, can't they? And it kind of goes into this chart like of being a very good practitioner, because you can feel, oh, I can feel this happening there and that. And yes, you can, but that can take you away from the neutral, right?
Thank you. Absolutely. I mean, matter of fact, when we are, I use the word efference for that. In other words, when we're nosy about what's going on over there, we're already into separation.
Mm-hmm.
If it only do I pay attention to any activities, if they just sort of show up, like I couldn't avoid it, but I don't go looking for anything happening, and I certainly don't describe it to myself or name it, because every one of those things pull me far out of my neutral.
Right.
And I'm going to describe this a little bit religiously for you. And it's going to, people that are offended by religion, I'm sorry, but this is how it goes. The word enfleshment is a Christian term. And it means that the Christ Sophia principle lives in me and as me. In other words, the Christ Sophia union, the Shiva Shakti union, has imploded into my cells, and now it lives my life with me and as me. So there's this cooperative process that's going on. And there's a lot of books and a lot of literature that describes how that feels. And one book is called The Practice of the Presence of God.
Yeah, I've got that one. The
Brother Lawrence.
Brother Lawrence. Yeah, I got that one. Yeah. Yeah, it's lovely.
Fantastic. So he describes the quality of what it's like, and just change it to hand contacts instead of what he's saying. But he says, when I wake up in the morning, I practice the presence of God. And he says, when I make my egg in for the presence of God. Yeah. And he goes on and on. I sweep the house out of the presence of God. And he goes, his whole day is practicing the presence of God. Yeah. So if we change that, the neutral, we wake up and the neutral wakes us up, and the neutral makes our egg for us, and the neutral, that. And then if we go into the room, the neutral, we're in neutral before the patient shows up, hopefully, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They're walking into a field of neutral that's called John.
Ideally. Right? Well, yes, they are.
It doesn't mean you feel neutral.
It kind of infuses the room after a while as well.
See, you can't but help it. And people will tell you, they'll tell you, and you go, look, well, are you talking about me? You can't possibly be talking about me. But you see, the neutral at the place that you and I are describing right now is totally paradoxical. You're absolutely ordinary John with all your warts and all your fears and all your desires and everything about yourself. Plus, you're this mystery of mysterious presence that is unerring. Yeah. Both. So the work is how do I not let the conditioned Charles get in the way of the neutral doing its job already with relative to that person? Yeah. And so it's totally instinctual. Like you said, I don't know why my hand's going there. Yeah. But it's going there. I mean, I imagine you've had this. I've had sometimes my hand thinks, or I think I'm going to one place and I actually end up in another on the way to the table. Yeah. And I go, well, how did that, that kind of thing? That's how you can go, oh yeah, well, the neutral's working. See, that's how you learn that you're under the neutral's, letting the neutral be in charge, because you're making contacts that you wouldn't, from your mind, cognitively, you wouldn't be making those. No. So there's that tape running of going, oh my God, I don't know why I went there, but well, I just have to trust and trust the tide and trust the unerring potency and just let go here. And that's the work. That's kind of the end all and be all of my dialogue, which actually isn't even true anymore, but that was some of the uptake. Now I just give up. It's not because I'm so great at it. It's just I've done it for so long that it's just that there's all that's left. Right. Is to give up and let the neutral be in charge, and whatever takes place. Even today, I mean, even now, like you said, I gave a session a couple of days ago, and the person said, oh, I've never felt, and she was a practitioner. She's a BCSD practitioner. She said, oh, I've never felt anything like this. Wow. And I was disciplined enough not to be nosy and ask her what was different. I didn't say a word. So I don't know. Okay. I don't know. Interesting. But it sounded like a compliment. Yeah. But I still didn't pull the curtain out. I just went, if she wants to tell me someday, she'll tell me. If she doesn't want to tell me someday, she won't tell me. So the discipline of being patient. Right. And being in don't know and really throwing the money down on that, not just faking don't know, right? But truly don't know. Mm. And don't know, what does that give you? Knowing. Mm-hmm. The disposition of don't know grants you infinite capacity for knowing, not from the mind though, but from the experiential. Yeah. And all this is neutral talking. Right. this is kind of neutral if neutral were talking to us.
Yeah.
This is what we're neutral talking to itself.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how it would, dear neutral, what would you tell us your story here? And this is what we're doing. And it's still a mystery. Even after an hour of this, it'll be a mystery.
Yes. And I think probably what happens is that we get so used to it as practitioners and in our lives that we don't realize what a strong field it is, and what a strong field is created by that. In well, more than intention, it's for me, it's like coming back home, isn't it? For me, it's coming back home, and inhabiting a place which is home, which is
Body.
yes, essentially the body expressing what you just said, like Shiva Shakti, and coming becoming home from, I would say, from a place of chaos or division to a place of unity, right? So that for me, that well, it's kind of like my life, I suppose, and I suppose one forgets how powerful that is and what a field that emanates.
And that's okay. You know why it's okay? Because the more and more you embody it, the more and the deeper that you integrate it, the more difficult it is to objectify it as something over there and point at.
Yeah.
So in other words, how many years you've been doing this, right? Just add them up. You've been building the neutral in yourself for how many years?
Well, I think it kind of started, although I didn't know it when I started meditating. So that was nearly 50 years ago. So
exactly. See, 50 years of building the neutral. That's a long time. Me too, by the way. Exactly. It's 51 years for me. It was in 1973 when I first ever got my cranial session, but I was already meditating.
Right.
And they married. I started meditating before the cranial session, not because I knew I was getting cranial sessions. And then they married from the get-go. So my meditation and my touch practice were one thing.
Yeah.
And I went through a journey, of course. I went through the whole biomechanical functional journey, and then biodynamics began to happen. And then I began to put together more the spiritual principles of all this. 1995 was the first time I ever experienced the tides. So 22 years of practice before a tide ever came.
Wow.
And I was never trained in biodynamics.
Right.
Just showed up. And then I had to go, what the heck is this? And luckily I had osteopaths that I was trading with, and they said, oh, that's biodynamics.
Right.
So retrospective.
And I think you said just now that that's not something you particularly relate to with clients in terms of tides, right? Is that what you said? That you don't these days relate so much to tides like the mid tide or the.
I don't. No. It's not that I don't relate to them anymore. They just don't happen anymore.
Oh, they don't happen anymore.
Yeah. They started stopping around 2002. So from 95 to 2002 was a whole tidal process. And then I was in a class one time, and this neutral, here's an example of a neutral. This neutral, we were already in the class field, we were already having experiences with the different tides. And there was the dynamic stillness, but after the dynamic stillness, there was this welling from inside and at the same time, coming from the edge of infinity towards me. So it's coming towards me, and it was welling inside me simultaneously. And it was a very, very, very painfully slow welling, like way slower than 50.
Right.
50 seconds, way slower than long tide, in other words. And it was like lava, liquid rock, blazing black, liquid rock, lava-like. And I could feel it in my teeth and in my bones more than any other. I had no map, there was no reference. I'd never heard of it, never. And it never stopped. I mean, it still is happening. But that was the beginning of the end of tidal experiences. Wow. And and I've been sort of like, and so the 2002, by 2008, I had a little bit of sort of vague understanding. And then the book that I talked about in the last interview, called Stillness, Touch, Path of Union, the material that from that book was written by a Kashmir Shaivite professor. I told you, Kurt Kurtzer.
Yeah.
And he mapped for me the journey of the Kashmir Shaivite Tibetan Buddhist journey of how the tides become the first thing that happens is when we go inward and the tide comes into the point of dynamic stillness and they disappear. The tides disappear at dynamic stillness, right? The definition of dynamic stillness is no movements. Sure. Well, if we stay in the innerness, the pratyahara, and stay inward and not get distracted outward by the infinite black, the dynamic stillness, the no me, no other, no time, no place, just infinite black. Well, it starts to descend and the tides are absorbed in the midline and disappear. And each element becomes alive, transmutes to the next, it comes alive, transmutes to the next, it comes alive, transmutes to the next. In other words, the tidal journey in reverse from earth all the way to ether. And then it infleshes into the cells. And that's the pure breath enfoldment that I call pure breath of love. The breath of love, the pure breath of love. I only use the breath because it co-breathes with the cells, like just a limnoscape, co-breathing. And if you go deeper and deeper and deeper into that degree of neutral, sort of beyond I am or beyond dynamic stillness, one begins to become so bodily relaxed. The nervous system becomes so off the body, it's no longer running the body, that every emanation of the sinoatrial node, you can feel it in every cell in your body. That's a kind of that's a deep, profound relaxation. And that's all I feel anymore is the pulse. That's I feel it in my bones, I feel it in my teeth, I feel it in my cranial system, and sometimes I feel it on patients. I don't have tidal experiences. I can sniff the tides if they're in the room, kind of, but I don't feel them. Like perfume, like, oh, there's, there's a luminosity, or, or there's the fluidic, or even there's the nervous system movements, the cranial rhythms. But they're usually just whiffs that sort of pass through.
Right.
And so I can talk about tides, I can teach about them, I can tell you the different boundaries of each one of them. I can give you all the languaging for them and the whole map, but I don't have them anymore. And a lot of practitioners get upset. They come to my classes and they go, "Oh, well, the tides went away." I go, "Congratulations." because there's always more, isn't there?
Yes.
See, if Sutherland would have stopped at the sutra work, we wouldn't have gotten functional. If he had stopped at functional, we wouldn't have gotten biodynamic. And if we stop at biodynamic, we don't stop.
No.
Just because he's passed doesn't mean we have to,
no.
Sutherland said.
Yeah.
Turn it into a fossilized religion. We need to do our own work based on his instructions, and it'll evolve. And this is where I've come to, and the osteopaths have come to it also. Jim Jellis has come to it. He never wrote about it much at the end, but his teachers still teach. They now teach. They call it the black magma in their biodynamic courses.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I go to France every year and I teach these biodynamic trained osteopaths. The shortest, the least experienced biodynamic osteopath there has had 9 years of biodynamic training. And the most experienced one has had 3 9-year,
wow.
27 years of courses. And they are now, that's why they like to hear me, because I can articulate this pure breath dimension of the neutral, because it started in 2002 and I've been trying to articulate it ever since. I'm still articulating it. And they really appreciate it because they're being taught about this stuff also, but it's more of introductory.
What do they call it? Black, what? Black
Black magma.
magma. Oh,
Magma,
okay.
the black magma.
Yeah.
Magma is the lava.
Yeah.
So it's this material liquid. It's a this is paradoxical now. See, once you've reached the descending current and the implosion into the cells and the enfleshment, which in Kashmir Shaivism and Tibetan Buddhism is called the completion stage, we have paradoxical consciousness, both and. John plus the infinite, all in one, and no problem.
No.
So John is the neutral and neutral is John, and they're distinct, but they're not separate. So you couldn't get rid of the neutral now if you wanted to.
No, I couldn't.
No, you can't. It's impossible.
I wouldn't want to.
Because you are neutral. See? And so the more and more you die, I call it die into the neutral or die into the love, because neutral at its highest depth, even Dr. Still said this, is love.
Yeah.
The union of all things, the non-separation from all things, which is an act of love. I'm not separate from anything, and I regard everything as an aspect of myself, and it's distinct both at the same time.
Yeah.
So this is living the neutral is living you.
Yeah.
And at first it's a cooperative process, and then it becomes, you can't help it. You can't help it. There's nothing you can do about it. You just ride along the carpet that you're riding on after 50 years. That's a long time of dedicated practice, and still look at you. Look at how enthusiastic you still are and how inquisitive.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's
fire.
Yeah. I mean, it was
inextinguishable.
Yeah. I mean, this thing about love it's funny, isn't it? But people don't tend to like to talk about it. A client was saying it today, and she was saying it in a kind of like an embarrassed kind of way, because she said, well, this feels like, I think she said, pure love. It's like she's never felt that before, because it's normally there's some agenda attached to it. So, but there's an edge to it, isn't it? And also there's an edge to people being able to really sink into that, the purity of that.
That's it.
I think for both for practitioners, but also for clients, like there's an edge. Oh, well, I haven't felt this before. Is this okay? Is this
exactly
what's supposed to happen here? You know what I mean?
And see, that's our job, is to have that integrity, and to kind of, this is a little bit efferent, so I apologize ahead of time. Part of our job is to be the guardian, as practitioner, the guardian of this field. From the beginning, perennial wave, all the way to pure breath of love, the sacred pulse. And in Kashmir Shaivism, as you noticed from the last lecture that we did, the last interview, it's called the spanda.
Yeah.
And it's the pulse of all things. And it's part of our journey.
Yeah.
Becker did not talk about it, did not write about it, but he definitely suffused it into biodynamics.
Yeah, in his right.
And we're the benefactors.
Yeah.
And I just said, heck with it. I'm too old. I've done this too long. I'm not going to keep my mouth shut any longer. And I put it in public. I published it. And not a single osteopath has screamed at me.
Good.
Which is quite an accomplishment.
Yes.
That I didn't get screamed at, right?
Wonderful. Have you noticed anything the last few years about people's ability to reach this, to be in this neutral? Have you been observing anything in people's bodies or their psyches? Just because the whole last 3 years or 4 years have been so strange, so unusual, so.
How about brutal?
Brutal.
Brutal.
Yes.
I mean, just to give you an example, you travel, I travel. The people that, forgive me forgive me, those people, forgive me for saying this, but the number of what I call zombies in the airports and on the airplanes and in the public transportation has exponentially grown in the last 5 years.
Yeah, I've seen.
5, 6, 7 years ago, they'd stick out like a sore thumb because there was only one of them. Now there are almost it's so many that it's just part of the matrix, and it's like almost this anti-life matrix going on, and it's amping up, which would make it harder if you hadn't been practicing for 50 years, and I hadn't been practicing for 50 years. It doesn't make it harder because of the practice, but it does affect the body, my protoplasm. So my body gets beat up much more traveling now
I find that
than ever before, and nothing has really changed except the quality of the human being in the milieu and what we're all going through. I mean, how many people are going through terror?
Yeah.
And the young children, you know, the youth, the young ones, the 20, 18, 15, 16-year-olds, a lot of them don't even think about a future. And so that's pretty potent. I mean, there's just terror of the apocalypse, forgive me for using a religious term, of the end, you know, in the field. In our days, when we were kids, it was the nuclear war and the bomb shelters, right? It was the war. Now is sort of the Armageddon, the apocalypse, the war of all against all, and nobody's going to be left. And it's existential. So
I was in Washington over the eclipse, and that was a strange time because people were being told to like stock up on food for 4 days and fill their SUVs with, and like we had this. I went to some friends. We had this post-apocalyptic party after.
I know you go out and get slaughtered. You know, that's.
But it's strange.
So it has changed.
Yeah, but I suppose then, so why though? I mean, obviously the whole COVID thing we know about, but
right.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think things have changed so fast and so radically?
Yeah, I think I think the divine feminine is finally rearing herself and saying it's time. And so things are going to have to shift out of this hyper-masculine hierarchical depression of the feminine, depression of the power of the feminine, and there's got to be a balance happening. And so some of the shadow material has to come up. I mean, in fact, as you know, as a practitioner, a spiritual practitioner and a cranial practitioner, the more you go into neutral over time, eventually you run into your shadows, your own shadows. Well, we're doing that collectively right now as a planet. So in a way, it's terrible news, but on another level, it's good news. And I couldn't say it's good news without this neutral talking.
Right.
See, the neutral gives me the good news piece of this apparently terrible news. You know, it's apparently very terrible news, but I think it's good news. We're the same age. We're just about the same age. We may not see the good news. I mean, we may not be here on the planet when the good news happens, but I am a firm believer because of what the neutral keeps telling me that it's going to eventually be good news. But it seems to be, it's going to be uglier and uglier as we go. There are some practitioners, spiritual practitioners, that say you think it's bad now, you haven't seen anything yet. This is just not even the bare beginnings of what we're going to have to go through as a human race. And ultimately, there's going to have to be this balance. And guess what? Our jobs are the same. We have to keep letting the neutral take us and still walk in life and still do what we do with as much integrity as we possibly can and not let fear or desire pull us out of our center.
Yeah. But one of my senses of the neutral is also constant regeneration. And
Absolutely.
constant regeneration, sort of coming back to one, then coming out and like coming
Yeah.
back,
Beautiful. That the whole microcosmic circuit and the whole expansion is infinite both ways, infinite in and infinite out, and they completely, it's a co-emergence of both.
Yes.
Very paradoxical place. A brain can't go there.
No,
Nervous system can't go there. That's why it doesn't pay to try to know anything.
no.
We'll be informed. We'll know what, we'll know that we can allow our hands to be moved, or we can choose the right food or enough rest and a proper amount of meditation and
Yeah.
all of that.
Yeah, but it's a constant thing. When I'm working, I feel that all the time, and it's very so even when someone is in a lot of pain, it's like this constant transformation, constant changing,
Oh,
and it's so going so deep.
that's what the neutral
Possible.
does.
Yeah,
That's it. That's the job. To me, if you ask the neutral, what's its job? It transmutates
yeah,
from maybe a more chaotic state to a more harmonic state, or from a separate state to a more united state. That's what neutral does.
yeah,
That's what midline does. That's what stillness does.
yeah. And it does it on a very practical level, doesn't it? I mean, again, another client was saying that how, like after the session, all the pain went through her from her body. I've had this so many times with people where you're working with them, and then it can happen towards the end of a session when the finally this it can be very chaotic, and then finally, oh, thank God, the stillness comes in, and then the pain goes like immediately.
Exactly. Exactly. And have you noticed a lot of times that happens after your hands are off and you're just sitting there? Me
Yeah,
too. That's why I know I'm not doing it.
yeah,
And I make the patient aware of it too. Did you notice that this happened after I took my hands off? They go, yeah, yeah, yeah. I said, this is yours.
right,
Of
beautiful.
course, we're in an interface here, but this is yours. This isn't mine. I didn't do this to you. We did it together.
Yeah,
And,
beautiful.
and cultivate this at home. Go home and cultivate this.
Yeah.
And hopefully they're interested in doing that, right?
Yeah, they know how. Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
That's not our job either, but we give it our best in that session room.
We got to wrap up in a sec. My God, I can't believe an
Yeah,
hour.
yeah,
Anyway,
like that.
one quick question from Danielle about your experience with babies and
Yeah,
neutral.
yeah.
Can you say anything about that?
Yeah, I worked with babies for a lot of years, just strictly for 5 years, actually, at a Rudolph Steiner College in Sacramento. The big work with babies is that you don't have long to touch them. So it's preparation work before touching. So super preparation, super innerness, super neutral, and then contact. And the contact doesn't have to be long. 1 minute, 30 seconds, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, depending on how old the child is. A lot of times I'll leave the baby in the mama's arms and they're just sitting there. And I put my hand on the back of their head and the back of their sacrum and just touch. Or I'll take them myself into my own arms, just based on the baby.
Mm.
And the same with children.
Yeah.
Just it's more about being fully prepared before they even show up in the room, and then making that really deep neutral interface with neutral, and that gives that opens the door, because they're not very far from the source.
No,
Babies.
they're so close to it, aren't they? You can see it like
Right,
when you put
right.
your hands on them, they just go into this place which you can kind of sense is familiar to them. It's very, very familiar to them.
Exactly.
They've been there,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
Beautiful.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Well, Charles, we need to wrap up.
I
So
know.
really enjoyed that. Thank you so much. It's great.
Great. Thank you.
And I'm sure we'll have another chat at some point about some other sub.
Yes.
Yeah.
And make sure that everybody can have that chart. I've already gotten permission to share it. So
Oh yes. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll just put the link up now to it.
Good.
It's from your website, dynamicswellness.com, and on there's a tab which says
News.
says
It's under the news page.
right. And then it says about the neutral, a handout on neutral.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's it. That's it.
Perfect.
All right.
Great. Thank you so much, Charles. And
Thanks.
thank you, everybody.
Thanks, John.